Is Mental Health Week. Look, listeners, don't go away. Every week seems to bring yet another compulsory morning tea with a new lapel badge to display how virtuous we all are, and cold coffee followed by a boring speech from the boss while you check your mobile phone for something more interesting. But I do want to devote some time to mental health because I think it really is an issue that matters, both personally to me and also in this difficult time to Australia. On the odd occasion, I've been in pretty dark places where life just seemed too painful, too lonely, too futile to go on. A couple of times I really wondered whether I did want to go on. This year alone, I know a couple of people personally who've ended their lives. Their loved ones and family didn't see it coming. It reminded me of the struggles I've had to wade through the quicksand that at times felt like it was engulfing me. And it's been an awful year for everyone in Australia, which is why Mental Health Week really does matter. Rich or poor alike, we've all lost something this year, a way of life. There's anxiety abroad in our land. Some have lost loved ones and haven't had the opportunity to say goodbye properly or to attend funerals. Many have lost jobs, possibly forever, homes, dreams of retirement, simple things that we all took for granted even this time last year. They've all vanished. And some of the most resilient have even been affected. So tonight, I just want to say a couple of things. If you're lonely or if you're suffering, please try to give it another go. Get up, keep going. A wise man once said to me, if you have a pulse, then you have a purpose. Life has taught me that it is often darkest before the dawn. No matter who you are, someone needs you and cares about you. Try not to forget that. When my mate Dean Jones was taken from us a couple of weeks ago, so abruptly, dying of a heart attack, I might add, not self-harm, the most common comment I heard from our cricket mates was, if only Dino could see how much we all loved him. If I touch just one person out there tonight who's feeling alone and in despair, I'll be thrilled. If you're suffering with loneliness or anxiety, reach out and talk to someone, even if it's a stranger, on a helpline. If you care about someone and worry about them, someone who's living alone or a long-lost mate or a family member, then tell them. This year, mental health matters more than it usually does. Life's precious. Please don't throw it away. Well, Tanvi, this is very much in your professional bailiwick, so am I overestimating the impact of the virus and isolation on people's mental health?
Look, Catherine, I mean, look, the mental health is in the background of both the health and economic challenges we have. And look, you shared your own vulnerability, your extraordinary story, beautifully there. So I think it's a fabulous topic that you bring up. And I'll always support, people seeking help for their emotional distress. And I think Australia, more than most countries, I think we've done a great job in destigmatising aspects of mental health. But I do want to raise some caveats, and this is some aspects I write about as a psychiatrist, where some of the concerns, arguably mental health has now become a catch-all term for all types of emotional distress, right? So it's almost like we're losing a language now for other types of experience, talking about in moral terms or metaphysical, spiritual terms. And we do have to be worried also that arguably increasingly, it's almost like people's experience lacks legitimacy unless it's medicalised, right? So now if you think of the times just through all the COVID stuff, often people are saying, oh, well, I need to see people because of my mental health. I need to do this. Rather than just be able to say, well, human connection is just part of being human, or I'm lonely, or I'm sad. I'm glad you used the term lonely. Increasingly, we can't even say I'm sad or I'm lonely. Or it's like if we don't... And this I see in my work too, and I think partly it overlaps with that. So, for example, if a child is having problems at school, they can't access help till they get a diagnosis, right? So it's almost like until we medicalise our experience, it's like our experience increasingly lacks legitimacy, but also overlaps with the wider culture where arguably the expression of pain also kind of almost... there's an element of status about it in the modern culture, of victimhood. So sometimes, aspects... there's certainly people in the culture that have almost gained, almost built careers out of their mental health advocacy or the time that they became unwell. And look, there's a grey there. Obviously, I want people talking about their mental health problems and seeking help, but I think we're also in danger of increasingly having a very limited language for adversity and suffering, increasingly.
Yeah.
And this actually drives, a lack of agency or difficulties in speaking about our experience, and that can actually worsen mental health because we have a very limited paradigm in which to kind of examine our difficulties. And you talked about your own spiritual, believing in God. There's whether it's spiritual, moral, metaphysical, and social. There's all these dimensions of the human experience that we need to be careful that aren't getting diminished by almost a colonisation of the term mental health.
Corey, what about your view on this? Have you ever sort of really looked up at the night sky and felt despair and wondered what it was all about, or are you pretty resilient, optimistic by nature?
Well, Catherine, before I answer that, can I just say, you're one of the most remarkable people I know. Every time I'm on this show with you, you peel back another layer of yourself and you just explain what this extraordinary life you've had. You're like an onion. You haven't made me cry yet. There's always another bit of skin to take off here. So I mean that in the most positive way imaginable.
Thank you.
But look, I've got to admit, I just don't understand this space, right? I've never felt that level of despair. But what I have been aware of, I've had friends that have lost children. I've had colleagues in Parliament who have been under extraordinary pressure where people have been worried about their well-being and their health. And a bloke who lost his son 25 years ago just said, what you've got to do as a friend is just ring up and say, how are you going? Are you okay? You feel a bit of an idiot doing it because you're doing it 3 times a week or 5 times a week, but it means a lot to the other person. And you can't comprehend how much it does mean until you're on the receiving end of that. And that's all I've tried to do. I've never been in that despair. God willing, I never will be, and no one close to me will be. But I just feel for those who are driven to that sort of that area.
Completely.
And anything we can do to support them through it is, and it's as simple as saying, are you okay? It might sound trite like a slogan, which it is now, but it is. Are you all right? Is there something you need from me? Do you want a shoulder to cry on?
Totally agree with you. And one of the great privileges of service in the ADF was that every day was Are You OK Day. We were vigilant about whether our mates were struggling, and we were trained to be very direct in doing exactly what you just said. If we had the slightest doubt, ask someone straight out, are you in a bad space? Are you going to hurt yourself? And that I've done it for friends, and friends have done it for me, and it's been a real learning curve. Look, Emmy, you're someone who's had really public, distress and had a lot of odium in politics, and probably didn't leave on your own terms. How did you handle that? Did you find at any stage that you were despairing, or did you have people rally to you if it's not asking too intrusive a question? Did you grow through the experience?
Yeah. Look, you're much braver than I am, Catherine, and I applaud your vulnerability that you were, you're willing to share what you've been through. And Corey, she did almost make me cry. Look, there was some pretty dark times. The last 2 years has not been glitter and rainbows for me. It's been pretty tough. I'm probably not at the stage where I'm ready to talk about the things that I went through and how dark some of those days did get. But I will say that I'm grateful that it was me who went through that, because I'm not sure that a lot of people that I worked with in the Parliament at the time would have been able to withstand it. I've had a pretty decent life experience thus far, and all of those experiences that I've been through, whether it was, the childhood DV that I lived through, whether it was my sister falling ill and being in a coma with meningococcal in Portugal when I was 20, the death of people prematurely in my life, children and young people that shouldn't have died. All of those episodes in my life were times where I thought I wasn't going to keep going. They were all times where I thought, this is it, I've had enough, this is too much to bear. And all I can say to people, and Catherine, you've been incredibly vulnerable and you wanted to reach out and touch people, is that you have survived all of your worst days, and it's something that, I've kept in my head. And my other little, go-to for dark days was get up, dress up and show up. And I just found by simply doing some of those really basic self-care things, I was able to keep going. But mental health is incredibly important, and Tanvir, I appreciate, when you talk about how we've got to medicalise people and everyone has to have this legitimacy. So I had some pretty significant panic attacks, over the last couple of years, and I constantly hear people say, oh, I had a panic attack, and I'm like, no, you actually didn't. Like those kinds of attacks are quite crippling and quite disabling for quite a long period of time. And to hear people sort of pass it off now after having some of those moments myself, I find it quite delegitimising for me and for the other people who actually deal with it. So I think that we have come to really casualise the use of some of the words around mental health that people who are suffering really do feel. And so I think that we need to strike a better balance. And that also helps bystanders to understand and to know when to step in and when someone's just using that turn of phrase. So I think that there is a balance to be struck, but Catherine, I think that bringing this up and talking about it in such an open way is so very important. And right now, I mean, we've got an entire state in lockdown, and loads of people on this side of the country, prevented from seeing people on the other side of the country, and people are really being tested. And our resilience as people right now needs to be strong and to be determined.
Well said, and thank you for your honesty as well.